Hospitality Meets is brought to you by RotaCloud, the simple workforce management software for hospitality teams. RotaCloud lets you create and share rotas, record attendance, and manage your team's annual leave, all in less time than it takes to make a brew. It can also make life easier for your staff, allowing them to check their rotas, request holiday, and even pick up extra shifts, all through the RotaCloud mobile app. Start your 30-day free trial today by visiting rotacloud.com/Phil and find out how much easier managing your team can be. Welcome to Hospitality Meets with me, Phil Street, where each week we take a light-hearted look into the stories and individuals that make up the wonderful world of hospitality. Today's guest is Jonny Bramwell, Head of Regional Operations at Rosa's Thai. Coming up on today's show, Jonny voices his concern over the podcast.
Is this safe? Is this happening? Are we allowed to do this?
Phil drops this bombshell.
The avenue of arsehole is a two-way street.
And Jonny brings his A-game on stories, which means this podcast is brimmed with this. All that and so much more as we delve into Jonny's epic journey so far. In addition to all the comedy gold in here, Jonny speaks openly and candidly about his journey, so there are learnings everywhere. So please don't forget to hit that subscribe button and give us a like and a share wherever you can. Enjoy. And a massive Hospitality Meets welcome to Jonny Bramwell.
Good morning. Are we allowed to timestamp?
Why not? Why not? And let's just go all in. We are on the 1st of May today.
Yes, we are.
We are already a third of the way through the year. How does that make you feel?
Yeah, exciting. It is exciting. It has flown by.
Flown by.
It's so soon you start talking about Christmas, right? And the sun's just popped out. So
I'm sure somebody's selling something Christmassy somewhere.
Yeah, we are.
Yeah. Indeed, we've just done it.
Exactly.
Yeah. Indeed. But yes, how are you? Where do we find you today?
Home at the moment before I hop in the car up to Manchester. Home is Henley-on-Thames. Lovely and sunny. The garden is tempting me, but yeah, I've got to go sit in the car for a bit. So
I know.
that's where I'm gonna be.
Given the winter that we've had, like the lure of the sun is a thing, right? I mean, it's there. Let's use it. It might disappear again. Well, it is going to disappear again. It's a bank holiday weekend, and bank holiday weekends doing what bank holiday weekends do.
Exactly.
Sun disappearance. But anyway, we're straight into the weather. Great stuff. Typical for this show, to be honest. So, but that's fine. We're British. That's what we do. Our small talk is all centered around winter and how busy you are. That's the other one.
Exactly.
I'd imagine pretty busy as well.
Really good. Yeah, really good. Really, really good at the moment. Proper lively. Not just on the coal face, if you will, but also like behind the scenes. Any number of projects going on. It's very exciting at the moment. Yeah, really good.
Good stuff. Yeah, well, we should probably tell the world what it is that you actually do.
Yep, good question. So I'm the regional head of ops for Rosa's Thai. So we've got 46 restaurants as a group. I look after 22 of them, all outside of London, apart from a few sort of that live in the south of London that trade quite provincially, like sort of Richmonds and New Kingstons. So yeah, well travelled. So today Manchester, but a regular week takes me all the way up to Scotland, Glasgow, Edinburgh, down to Exeter, over to Norwich, and everything in between. So
wow.
It's a lively role.
That is a patch.
It is a patch. Luckily, I've got other people geographically closer who I rely on for the sort of more direct talks. But yeah, the working week is generally spent between cars, trains, home, office, and all the glorious people in between.
Right. Yeah. But you know, every time we haven't known each other particularly long, but every time that we have met, you always seem to have a smile on your face. So you're clearly doing something that you enjoy doing.
Yeah. I think quite accidentally so. I think any number of cliches. I'm sure we'll probably throw out a few. I think if you enjoy what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. Now, I don't necessarily think that's true in hospo. I think it's a bit of a roller coaster, and some days in the week are a slog, but it is enjoyable. You get to work with people, and if you enjoy working with people, and you enjoy food and drink. Before we got started, we were chatting about drink, and it gets everyone excited. And as long as you like food and drink, it's probably a pretty good industry to be in.
Yeah, it's a really good base point to start from, isn't it? I had a chat just actually, in fact, I think it was last night's or Wednesday's release. Guy Friedman from The Pig made the comment when he was at school that I really love eating and drinking. And somebody said, well, maybe you should consider a career in hospitality then. There was two things there. One, I was like, match made in heaven. But two, a careers advisor telling somebody to go and work in hospitality.
Yeah,
that's a new thing.
Never. Yeah. Yeah, no, my careers advisor never advised me that. I was going to go down the sort of the medical route. I was very interested in medicine and becoming a doctor, and I was an auxiliary nurse in a hospital before I landed behind a bar.
Is
And
that right?
yeah, I was right. Yeah, I was
Well, still a
cleaning up.
people-centric business.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Very different. I mean, similar sort of, I guess, anti-social hours. But yeah, that was sort of the original calling, and then I ended up working behind a bar, and 20 years later, here we are.
Yeah, well, thanks for coming on the show. It's good to chat. Cheers. Bye. Yeah, we'll maybe go into a bit more depth. But why? Well, I suppose the question is, we've kind of just gone straight to this, and that's actually probably would have been the next question anyway, which is how did you get into hospitality? But why was the medical profession kind of the original calling? How did that kind of come about?
Yeah, fascinating. I think when I was at school, and I wasn't. I think I'm probably of vaguely reasonable intelligence, but I just wasn't an academic. I didn't. I just didn't. And it's probably I'm still probably guilty of it in the sense of I don't like coursework. I like to just kind of get stuff done. And I guess sitting in a classroom for an hour wasn't something I particularly enjoyed. I went to a really good school down in Devon and Torquay. It's a grammar school, language college, amazing facilities. But just classroom it just didn't do it for me. Like I just wasn't engaged with it in any way, shape, or form. And actually, I probably didn't value the art of learning until I became probably a young adult, mid-20s, where I suddenly was like, oh, learning's quite fun, actually having an education and filling your brain with sort of all the other fonts of knowledge is quite good fun. And I think coming out of school or going through school, I wanted to be an actor for a bit, full of drama. I had absolutely no scientific care or love or joy. I really didn't like chemistry, biology, or physics or any of that. And then suddenly I got through to sort of, I guess, sixth form, the end of school. And I had a period of time in hospital. I had a bike accident. I think I bruised or ruptured my spleen, something, and I ended up with a few days in hospital. And it was nothing serious, but when you're young, that sort of stuff gets checked. And I was watching everyone in the hospital and chatting to the nurses, and suddenly found this sort of fascination for, I don't know, chemistry, biology, physics. Spent a lot of time just reading books. You didn't really do much in hospital for 3-4 days. You didn't have phones or anything like that, and TV you had to pay for in hospitals at the time, so that didn't happen. So I just spent the time in hospital just reading, I guess. And I came out of it and suddenly went back to school with this real love for chemistry, biology, the physical world, really understanding science. And then through that, kind of enjoyed it. I had a really inspirational teacher who taught me chemistry in a new way. And then that's when I sort of found a love for medicine. I was like, yeah, I want to go do medicine. And then I guess for whatever reason, sort of things happened with my family, and I had to go and get a job. So in amongst sort of the work experience that I was doing auxiliary nursing, which was whilst I was at school, and you couldn't do too many hours and you couldn't sort of gain qualifications that way, I started to work in a bar. And I guess my sort of geekery, nerdyism in hospitality came out. I really wanted to learn how everything was made, how things were cooked, why things had flavor profiles and balance, why coffee had to be roasted a certain way. I really had that sudden thirst for education, because I guess I was in an environment that was better for me to learn in. It's all very hands-on. It's a very kinesthetic way of learning. You mess up any number of times, whether you've launched a milkshake on a guest or whether you've dropped a hot coffee on your limbs. So I guess it was it's a school of hard knocks, isn't it? And I think when I sort of land in hospitality and you're working with people and you're really trying to understand the product you sell and you're figuring out, how the world works, hospitality is an excellent platform for that. And yeah, I guess that's sort of the early part of the journey. And that first place I worked in, the guy who ran it was just wild. He changed the way the business was every other week. One week it was a restaurant, the next week it was a bar, the next week he said, I'm going to take all the furniture out and put cinema seats in. I mean, the guy
Oh
was
wow,
mad, but excellent, really good inspiration. And then he fired me.
very inspirational.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I basically got fired from my first job in hospo. So I don't know if that's a good starting story, but I did end up going to the pub next door, actually, in Totnes. It's no longer there. It's kind of merged in with something else, but it was called the Castle. And yeah, I basically finished, got sacked, went to the pub next door, had quite a few beers. And I said to the landlord, Andy, I was like, have you got any jobs? I've been fired from next door. And he went, if you come back tomorrow and you're not hungover, come chat to me and we'll see where we go. And then that kind of kickstarted the rest of my career, really.
I love the fact that, I mean, that honesty is one of the best things, right? In job interviews, I think you took that to an extreme there. I've literally just been sacked. I'm now drinking to myself to a pulp in your pub. Any jobs going?
Yeah, that's pretty much it. I think that's how I've got every job since,
Yeah.
actually.
Yeah, and I also want to stress test your theory around you being reasonably intelligent as well, because
Yeah.
you might be the first person on the show actually that's used the word kinesthetic. So I'm all on board. I think you're definitely classifying the reasonable intelligence very, very well.
It's the grammar school education. I
Yeah.
came out of it being able to speak long words quite well. Yeah, I can't spell it though.
It's not the words that you say that are important. It's the confidence in which you say them.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
yeah, which is kind of my mantra for life. I think I think it's known as blagging it. Actually, is
yeah,
what
yeah,
it
yeah,
is.
yeah. Yeah,
But
let that bit
yeah,
out.
there was a yeah. No, look here, it's fine. There was a couple of things that I kind of took note of there around. You used the word inspirational a couple of times actually. One with your mad entrepreneurial guy who was just all over the shop, and probably for somebody who maybe was at a stage in their career where they were very career minded, that would have been maybe a bit of a nightmare. But I can imagine for somebody who's at the beginning, where you're just kind of a little bit of a sponge, and you're trying to learn and kind of understand your maybe even your place in the world, and all of that, like, probably it was quite exciting.
Yeah, totally. And I think through my career, I've kind of gone in between these big companies and brands and founder-led operations. At different times of your career where those sorts of learnings or those work environments are really fulfilling if you're in the right place at the right time to implement and so kind of figure it out. And I think, yeah, he was inspirational, but I mean, for all the wrong reasons. But
Yeah.
he still managed to get things done. No matter how wild it was, or even like slightly abusive, that sort of management style was, he still got stuff done. It's still a successful business, and he still made the right decisions probably for him and that business. And but it set my career off on a path. So whether I was right or wrong, he was right or wrong, it's put me sort of my career where it is. And I guess sort of fulfills that other cliche. There's not really any missteps in your career, right? There's just lessons you can take for it and move on. And
Yeah.
actually, having made that decision to go to the pub next door. The owner of this business, he always really didn't like the guys who ran the pub next door. The sort of noisy neighbor, or I don't like the way they run the business or the pub. And I guess the enemy of your enemy is your friend. And that was just a really good business to join. It was a family-run business. A chap called Andy Milton, and his son James was the manager of the pub, and his other son Richard was involved in it. And Andy's son James kind of wanted to take a bit of a step back. He wanted to come out of hospitality, join the police. But Andy's background, he's this 6'4" Lancastrian, proper old school operator, Bass, Whitbread. He, owned and operated his own pubs for ages. He was a real skilled publican, and the learnings I got from him pretty much stuck me instead for the rest of hospitality. So whatever he did in his small business, it wasn't big. It was $6,000 a week, wet trade. Did breakfasts. That was it. The rest of
Right.
it was all cask ale and beer and sort of late nights and busy Friday, Saturday nights. I was there for about 3 years, and he just invested in me. He took a risk, took a bit of a punt, and yeah, invested in
Clearly
me.
you
Put
were
me through.
drunk when you met him.
Yeah, yeah. And I wasn't the day after when I think I officially applied,
Yeah.
and had a breakfast. It was excellent, excellent breakfast. It was a large breakfast. People might remember it for watching the old Castle breakfast. £4.50 for a big one.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah.
It wouldn't be £4.50 now.
No, definitely not. Definitely not.
Well, if it
But
is, you'd have to question why, right? That's the
well, it was legendary at the time. Everyone used to come for the castle breakfast. Mary was the chef. Everyone spoke to Mary, so she'd work her 4 or 5 hours in the morning doing breakfasts, and she'd be on the bar in the afternoon. And that was the rhythm of the pub. It was it was a great pub. Real community, but high street, local at the top, old school. Totnes Castle was in the beer garden. So you'd be drinking this medieval castle top view. It was just a great space, really well run. Well, like I say, sort of from my personal point of view, I was just invested in. And
Mm.
I think, that's kind of the mantra I've tried to live by through my career is if I can invest in people, I can spend as much time with people as possible, I can, break down barriers for them, or I can help them solve problems. That's kind of been where all the successes are. So, and I think that, that you sort of spoke about careers advice, and whether someone would advise to go down hospitality careers. I think if you land in the right place at the right time, you work under the right leaders, you can get really, really far in hospitality for sure.
Mm.
for sure.
Totally, and it's such a key point as well. Like, I mean, there's also another sliding doors moment that happens with that first role that you had, whereby you're working for this, let's call him highly entrepreneurial individual, and
Yeah,
there's a fine line, right, between highly entrepreneurial and complete madness. But in any case, you probably straddle both on any given day. But if that could have equally burnt you as well, that experience, if you're not the right kind of person, that and the risk is that when you have an environment like that where that's your first experience, or you go into a place and you just work for an absolute arsehole, for want of a better phrase,
yeah,
is that you then mark the whole industry with that experience.
yeah,
And and also we've all worked for, I've worked for arseholes. I have probably been an arsehole at some point to the
yeah,
wrong person in the wrong moment. But in the end, as long as they're only moments, that's fine. If it's like every single moment that you come to work where you're kind of questioning, why am I here? Then that's a different ballgame completely. So to take you're probably a little bit lucky that your next experience was then with Andy,
yeah.
especially given how you got the job.
Yeah, correct, correct. And I think, again, School of Hard Knocks. I was 19, and he gave me the keys to the pub and gave me a flat above, and it
Yeah.
was close to where my mum lived, so I could keep an eye on her, and my brother was off at university, so it was good timing, right place, right time, right people, and I'm not saying, this is not the right phrase to use at all. Like, he was a father figure, but he was definitely the leader I needed in my life at that time,
Yeah.
in terms of not just my career, but my personal life. And the friends I met who were in that pub or who I work with, still very close contacts. One of them still works with me now, and so there is, the contacts and the bonds that were made in that business. That's kind of repeated itself throughout my career in different places I worked. So when I joined Green King after, it was very similar. Some of the people I worked with there, I was best man at one of their weddings. Actually had a beer with them last night, and those contacts have always been there in other places I've gone, where you with these just incredibly solid bonds with people, because you're right. You have the stresses, you have the pressures, you have the problems that occur, but when you get them all through together, it makes you just such resilient partners with these people. And it's I would hope, I want that to continue throughout my career. It would be foolish to say there won't be tough times, or and that could be next week, it could be in a month, it could be next year. But
Mm.
those relationships that you forge through those tough times, and the learnings you take, just they set you in such a good stead. They really do.
Yeah, totally. And everybody will be able to recount a moment or somebody that they've worked for where that person just helped everything click for them. And
Yeah,
as you say, it's not even necessarily just about the role itself. It's about being a good human, being somebody who is a good worker, and all of these kind of the basic foundational stuff that really helps you set your foundations for your life. There's a guy, and he kind of was a bit Marmite, really, a guy called Keith Delamere, who was maybe one of my original mentors, and he was quite an intense guy when focused at work, but actually, just super cool as soon as you kind of, got through that barrier,
yeah.
as it were. And a lot of people misread that for, you know, anal, over the top, and all that. But he was just driven to success. And I was really grateful that he was one of my early mentors. And I had a real problem at the beginning of my career with actually turning up for work on time, because, as I've said on this podcast many, many times, one of my favorite things in the world is sleep. And I've never been especially great at getting out of bed in the morning. And so the amount of times that I'd set the alarm and would snooze, but then fall right back asleep and like just sleep through the rest of the alarm, and then I'd get the phone call into the cabin saying, where are you again? This has got to stop, sort of thing. Have a meeting with him where my tail is completely between my legs, and he said, there is a real simple solution to this. If this is if this is your energy and that's what happens, then if one alarm clock is not working, you know what you can do? What, get a second alarm clock? Yeah. Or get the night team to give you a call. It's like there's so many solutions to this.
Yeah, yeah.
It's not a big problem. And it sounds like such a trivial thing, but it totally changed my outlook on it. It gave myself the kick up the backside that I needed. He
Yeah.
didn't lambast me for it. It was just, he was aware that that was a challenge for me. So let's get past the challenge, rather than me saying you're shit and you can't turn up to work on time, and and all of that. You're running the risk of losing your job, etc., etc.
Yeah, totally. And I think I've probably been that manager at some point. I say manager because it's not good leadership, it's management. You lambast someone for their behaviors rather than giving them an opportunity or finding a solution to correct it. And I think, I sort of go back to what we were saying earlier. Have I been that arsehole before that people have worked for and people go, don't work for Johnny, he's an arsehole? You know what? Yeah, people probably have experienced that. I'd like to think it's in the minority, sort of 5-10% of people who worked with me or under me or alongside me probably go, Johnny, he doesn't, I don't want to work with him. No, he's not, he's not good to work for. But I'd like to think the majority are kind of, like Keith, the sort of person who will give you that coaching need that you need to be able to correct your behaviors. And I think I'm very fortunate that I was at the right place at the right time with Incipio Group, sort of coming through COVID to get my promotion to ops, right? And it's, as much as operations is a skilled and talented role, sometimes you've got to be in the right business at the right place to get that role. So I'm very fortunate that sort of in the post-COVID sphere, I've been learning operations, and the operations world now compared to, I guess, when I first experienced large group ops, it is a very different role. Those people who were ops managers 20 years ago, they were, police officers. They were, don't you dare do that, correct it now. But they wouldn't give you the coaching. They wouldn't give you the mentoring. They wouldn't give you the advice or sort of the little bit of a leash to go and correct yourself. And, modern ops is all about coaching. The best operators out there at the moment, the best businesses are the ones where, you're given enough of a leash to make mistakes, to have your faults, to express your opinion, but have the corrective actions with it. And it's, there's a fine line between the coaching bit and the accountability, but it's such an important element of hospitality leadership that modern operators allow that. Because it probably set you up in good stead, right? You probably, like you say, just one little conversation just changes the way you think about it all, and that's those little key points are really key throughout careers.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's not forget as well, that the avenue of arsehole is a two-way street, right? So I literally just made that up, but
You put that as a subheading on the cast.
Indeed, we'll call it the reverse arsehole effect. That's what it is. I've never said arsehole more in a short space of time, I think, in my entire life.
I think I started it. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry. But it's one thing, I suppose, we can recount the people who we feel maybe have been, a bit overbearing as leaders / managers on us. But there's also the flip of that. Like, you also have to come to the party. You can't, and I suppose to dwell on the arsehole thing, arseholes can breed arseholes, right? That's the thing. And so if that's how you've been led, then maybe you think that's the way it is. And so then you take that on board yourself and you take that forward as your management style. And it's a very, very dangerous game. And that's probably, the industry's probably suffered from that a little bit through that kind of, that shouty chef phase that was really, really, it's almost trendy, like, and, it kind of just became the thing to be done. Whereas now we're fighting back against that, and that's changing massively, rightly. But you can't also just pull somebody apart because that's the way that they were taught. I think that's a key point. You have to give people the opportunity to want to change themselves and whatever they're kind of responsible for.
Yeah, I agree. And I was sort of about to reference the same point. I think when I was with Green King for about 3.5 years after I'd left in the pub in Totnes. So I guess that sort of medicine ambition got hold of me, and I was like, I need to leave Devon. It's my brother had left Devon, he'd moved to London, and he'd started a job, and all my mates had finished university, and they were starting to do jobs. They would start to become like directors of pharmaceutical companies, and I was just running a pub, right? So I guess the ambition got
it's
better
not just
with me.
running a pub. That's very important. Community pillar.
I could have done it forever. Honestly, it's such. I look back at it with such fondness, but it was so comfortable. And when you get comfortable, you need to check yourself and go, do you know what? And it's fine to be comfortable at some points. I'm quite happy where I am now, but I've got 3 young kids, and I don't really want to, add any more pressure to my life. So I'm happy being comfortable. But I think, at that time I was ambitious. I was like, right, what do I go and do? So I joined Green King, And again, someone took a punt on me. The late Mark McGuigan, he was the ops director for Green King Locals, and I met with him after sort of an interview stage, and yeah, he took a punt on me. He was. I remember him saying to the BDM at the time, Paul, who became my area manager. He was a mature head on young shoulders, and I think he may have been wrong. I was very much a young head, just kind of doing quite well at an interview, I guess. But he took a punt, and and he didn't need to take that risk, at all. An ops director who had 170 pubs, he didn't need to take that risk at all. I didn't know corporate ways. I didn't understand marketing. All I knew was, what is a good pub? It's run by someone who makes it safe, it makes it secure, and invests in its people. And I didn't know that is literally the basics of hospitality at the time. I just went, if I can do that in a pub, surely I can make it successful. But I'd never done a food operation. I'd never worked in any other pub, other than the one I got fired from. So I guess I hadn't, I didn't really know what I was doing. So I was on the Green King relief circuit for about 6 months, and my world, that was an education. That was my university. That was every location I could possibly be put into.
I'd
Watford,
imagine with that.
London,
Sorry.
Birmingham. Yeah. I can name all the places, but ended up back in Reading.
Yeah, I'd imagine as well with that kind of hat on, where you're part of the relief circuit, as it were, which sounds it's just wonderful phraseology, isn't it? The I just go in and provide relief to everyone. Yep. Is that you kind of probably have to rip up what you think you know per every pub that you go into, because what you've just learned in a pub in Reading is completely irrelevant to a pub in Devon, is completely irrelevant to a pub in Manchester, to wherever you're going.
Yeah, and I'm not too sure I was ready for that. I'm not too sure my brain was sort of open enough to that at all. I was very much, I knew what one good pub looked like. I went into another pub, and that pub wasn't necessarily worse or better. It had its own pros and cons, whatever it was in terms of its leadership or its demographic or whatever. Stuff I know now, but at the time, I was trying to, I guess, put a square peg in a round hole. I had my very limited knowledge. I guess I wasn't really contributing to those businesses, but that was the whole point of being on the relief circuit, right? And it's to give you that education and that understanding. And yeah, again, I was well invested in. I made a metric ton of mistakes on some of those. And the place I kind of landed in as a training house in Reading, there's a couple that were the management team there, Ian and Wendy. And Ian was kind of like the area trainer for Paul, and Wendy was more the sort of hands-on operator. Really lovely kitchen operation. The fact that the chef's still there in the iteration of the pub there now, and I spoke to him quite recently because we've got a restaurant in Reading and it's down the road, so I see him quite often. And it was just a really good place to learn, and they were really good at teaching, and holding me to account, but showing me the right way. And I really valued their assistance, and Ian was really key when I got my own pub in Reading, which was kind of 2 miles up the road in Emma Green, North Reading. That he was a real help. He was a real mentor. He was a buddy. He was someone I could rely on. He's someone I could vent to, and he was someone I had much closer contact with than Paul. And for me, joining a corporate business, having an area manager or an ops who tells you what to do, you have a bit of a mistrust on it. You don't quite get it, but then when you do the ops role, he had 21 pubs across a massive estate and a head office in Bury St Edmunds. I genuinely think, how the hell did he do that job? And I think he's still doing it, to be fair. But you have a different lens on these things as you progress through your career. But you're right. So to your further point, at that time, it's very hard to open your mind to those new ideas and those ways of learning. And I did have a hard lesson coming out of Green King, a real pile of arrogance in me, a real, pride besets a fool sort of thing. And I really came out of Green King in not very good way, sort of, I guess, mentally or professionally. And I can look back at that now and I can understand why. But at the time, I didn't know. I didn't know I was burnt out. I didn't realize I was being really arrogant. I didn't realize I didn't know it all. So I actually took on another pub with them, quite food led, and I just couldn't do it. I didn't have the skills in the locker to do that, and that's fine, right? I think it's fine, and I think anyone who worked with me then could probably recognize that, but I didn't recognize it at the time. It was a hard fall for sure.
Yeah, but I appreciate you saying that openly, because I think this is also probably a part of a lot of people's journeys, is that especially in a world that kind of requires you to push, keep moving forward. If you're not moving forward, you're being left behind, blah blah blah, and all that kind of stuff. which on the one hand is true, but that's also not the journey for everyone. And also identifying when you have reached a point whereby all of a sudden you're in a position where you're out of your depth and you maybe don't know why, because all of your roads have led to this point. To be able to turn around and be able to say, first of all, to yourself, right, I'm not where I'm supposed to be, and then try to figure out why that is it's a really powerful conversation to have with yourself. I've had it a couple of times in my career so far as well. It's something that has led me to be very reflective on the 1st of January every single year, is, questions around, am I where I should be? If not, why not? Is that on me? Is it on the place that I'm working? All of the kind of the questions that you learn with maturity, I think, really in the end, especially when you have been through some things whereby you've probably felt displaced. And with displacement then comes burnout, comes, stress, just this constant feeling of I'm not getting ahead, I'm not, doing what I should be doing, etc., etc. But at least I on the one hand, it's not that I crave that experience, but I am very grateful that I have been through something like that too, to understand the signals and the feelings that come with being in that space. And it's very easy then to course correct, or it's easier to course correct if you understand your own foundations.
Yeah, and I guess I just didn't realize what was important to me. I didn't realize I'd accidentally built roots in Reading. I mean, that's not a sort of thing that I think anyone's ever said. So that's a new phrase. I just, but, I had a real fondness for it. I bought a house with my now ex girlfriend at the time, and I had friends who were, like I say, I went for a beer with one of them last night. Who became really close in the pub I was with. And I'm still very close to the people who drank in that pub. And I didn't realize I'd built those roots, right? So I'd already uprooted myself in Devon. I'd kind of accidentally built those roots in Reading. So when I took this other pub on in Bournemouth, Ashley Cross, for Green King, I didn't realize I was really stretching myself. I was away from all my connections. I was away from the things that actually mattered. And I guess I didn't realize what mattered. I didn't realize what was important to me at the time. I was just career, arrogant. And yeah, I've probably got GMs who've worked for me in the last 5-6 years who probably have been in that same place, but I've been able to have quite a trusted conversation with them, seen where they've had issues at work and eked out their own personal, I guess, not problems, but things that they didn't realize were important to them. And I think because I had that experience and I didn't trust in, I guess, my bosses at the time to have that open and honest conversation, that allows me to have that conversation now, which is, is everything okay at home? Do you need any assistance or anything? Can I talk to anyone for you? Can I signpost something that might help you get through whatever it is? And I think I see a lot of younger me's in the industry, and it's very hard to trust your boss. It is something that is, you don't want to display that vulnerability, but trying to eke that out is really important. And it's same as anything we were speaking about earlier. You need to give people the opportunity to express that or to have that conversation, and it's up to them to I guess not to or do it, I guess.
Yeah. Creating the space where they feel comfortable enough to share in that way is, it is gold, but it's obviously way easier to say than do. And trust is built in time. Trust is built through conversation. Ultimately, in the end, there's still probably that psyche that where somebody would go, yeah, but if I tell him that I'm going through a divorce and that's what's impacting my performance at work, then they start filling their own stories in around what's going to happen as a result. But really the only way is to have the conversation, right? I mean, it sounds very kind of matter of fact and pretty black and white, but actually really it is. But critically, the environment has to be right for them to feel like they can do that. Otherwise they just won't.
Yeah totally.
Yeah.
5-star hospitality means having the right people in the right place at the right time, and that's exactly where RotaCloud can help. RotaCloud is the online platform that makes planning rotas, recording attendance, and managing annual leave easy. Its simple, drag-and-drop interface lets you create and share rotas with your team in minutes, while our built-in budgeting tools mean you'll know exactly how much you're spending on staffing before sending the rota out. RotaCloud also makes life easier for your staff, allowing them to check their rotas, request time off, and pick up extra shifts, all through the RotaCloud mobile app. Start your 30-day free trial today by visiting rotocloud.com/Phil and find out how much easier managing your team can be.
So yeah, I mean, I guess coming out of Green King, real lesson for me was I need to learn, I need to know how a kitchen works. Having gone, I kind of I
Small
figured
detail.
yeah, well, it was a real problem for me. I couldn't, and again, sort of go back to a further point, I couldn't manage chefs. So having a pub in Reading, and it took about 300 quid on food a week, and I got it up to about 3 grand. So for me, I was like, for me, that was a real education. I'd never been in a food business or a business where I had to grow food, so that post-smoking ban, there was a real bubble in pub food. It was 2 meals for 9 quid, fish and chip Fridays, rhythm of the week, pies, steaks, a lot. That was so new to pubs because they were just so reliant on people sitting inside smoking all the time. Food wasn't a thing. Suddenly everyone stopped smoking, everyone got hungry, and it was just a nice place to eat food, right? So I was part, I guess, of that journey of Green King landing a good food offer. They went through a marketing segmentation plan. There was a really good strategy at Green King on recruitment and on marketing, and I was lucky to be a part of that because I didn't know any of it. So it was very good for me to learn it as they were building it. So I guess when I took on that pub in Bournemouth, it was an I think Michelin starred or AA Rosette pub that Green King bought, and then they turned it into one of their premium segmentation pubs. But the food just wasn't the same. These were regular customers that were eating 30 quid beautiful homemade pies, and suddenly we're putting in bought in defrosted steak pie. Good product, but just not the same as what they're having before.
Yeah.
And so I was managing chefs and team who were transferred over, who kind of didn't want to be there, didn't really like me, didn't respect me. I didn't have the tools in my locker or the understanding or the knowledge of a kitchen operation to manage that. I was just, and on top of the stuff that we just spoke about, I just couldn't do it. I lasted about 6-7 months there. I just wasn't in a good place. I look back on it now, and the same as everything, that was a good lesson. But at the time, it was really hard. Really
Yeah.
hard. But it's one of those times I think everyone's got it. I was in my mid-20s. I was like, is hospitality really the career for me? Is this actually what I want to do? Am I actually good at it? So I took some time out, did recruitment for a bit, absolutely despised it, and realized hospitality is actually pretty good. Did it for about 4 weeks. Oh my God, I hated it.
But take me back,
really.
take me back.
so I had a bit of time to look around for something. So I ended up at Ed's Easy Diner at the time, who I don't know if they exist anymore. Actually, I don't
I
think they got
remember
any sites left.
the name. Yeah, that's a good point. I don't know if they
I
are
don't think
still
there are
around.
anymore. Yeah, so I joined just as they were kind of going through the investment and the rollout, and they were sort of moving into the shopping centre space. So they were opening a new one in Reading, and I went and trained in Soho and Euston and Trocadero, and then I was at the Lakeside restaurant for a bit. That was awesome, really good. So jumping out of pubs into sort of a more QSR-y restaurant, really understanding the kitchen operation in way more detail, not really managing like ego chefs, right? But just learning the basics of a good food operation. They were sharp, really sharp operation, very profitable, really good leadership team. So I was there for about sort of year and a half, I guess. Opened up Reading, did all their openings in some crazy places that I'd never been to before: Gateshead, Derby, Gloucester, Southampton, and yeah, excellent education in sort of food. Yeah, and it's, I guess, I had to make a conscious decision to realize what I needed to learn to progress my career, and that, I took a hit, I learned from it, and I moved on in the right way. And it was just the right job at the right time at that time. Yeah.
Yeah, that's wonderful though. That kind of like on the one hand, when you've reached the point that you had with Green King, like taking a step away is the right thing to do for sure, because you need the headspace to regroup, right? Two, then going into something that you just did not click with at all helps then hone the mind and go, okay, well, maybe the grass is not greener somewhere else, and actually I just need to realign, the things that are important to me. But then to find a brand that you just kind of immediately clicked with in that moment it helps you just get back on the horse, I guess, and get cracking on again.
Yeah, it just felt right, and I just felt immediately invested in. I felt like, there was a real care for teaching me the things that I'd obviously, I knew how to run a business. I knew how to run a compliant, healthy, safe business with a happy team, and all I needed to do was figure out how to run a food op well. So that's why I got laser focused training at that. At Blue Water, the busiest restaurant, Lakeside, a really well run restaurant, trainer manager. So after 4 or 5 weeks of that and a few new openings, we opened in Reading. It opened with a bang. It was a really successful little restaurant. It's now a Wingstop, a very successful Wingstop.
Yep.
But it was a fantastic little restaurant, really really good, and it was a great little product. And Ed's they really blew up. They were opening about 10 or 12 a year at the time, so it was a really good business to be a part of. But I ultimately ended up back in pubs. I ended up sort of back in a gastro pub scenario with Bell and the Dragon, which is now part of Fuller's, and that it's I've probably had it 3 times in my life where you work with a team that is just so unbelievable. That is just absolute talent. And I was with Bell and Dragon maybe a year and 2 months, right? And it doesn't sound like a long time. And I remember at the time, a lot of my friends were like, "You changed jobs a lot," because I was with Ed's for a year and a half, and then I was with Bell and Dragon for basically a year and 2 months. But it felt like an eternity. It was one of those jobs where everyone just worked. That was it. You just worked, worked, worked. And some of the people who I worked with at the time there, I guess sort of the biggest name there was a chap called Ronnie Kumbugwe, and he is now exec head chef for Ramsay. He's in Ramsay's latest sort of Netflix thing. Amazing personality, just unbelievable, like cult of personality within it. And he's just really well educated, immensely erudite, hardworking, skilled, knowledgeable chef, heart on his sleeve, but an absolute bastard. But in like a really good way. Like I really hope I say this with like in the most loving way.
With love,
Like
yes.
he was just excellent. And he was sort of further to what we said earlier. He was of that school of being absolutely beasted, but that sort of real angry chef, do it or you're going to do 50 push-ups in the bin store sort of thing. Old school hospitality that still has that negative tone to it now, but he is not that leader now. You see it, and when you speak to him, it's the same. And when I work with him, the same. He is of that generation of chefs and people that wanted to break the mold. Were we all working stupid hours and doing stupid things? Yes, but it felt like a positive change. I felt that sort of year and a half working with Bell and the Dragon before it was sold to Fuller's was unbelievable for all those reasons. One of the managers I work with is now a director of a wine firm. One of the bartenders has his own pub now. One of the other people I work with is now like an events director. So everyone's in an amazing place now, having left that business. And it's just there's probably a few occasions where I've worked in a business. The other one is probably the Gun in Spitalfields, which I found a few years later, where you just work with some utterly amazing individuals for that period of time, and it feels incredible, and you just learn so much. And again, it was working for an entrepreneur, Joel Cadbury, who is intensely inspirational. And his standards were through the roof. You would have a management meeting, and if he saw one of the South Bank Bordeaux's on the chalkboard slightly spelt incorrectly, or the accent was on the wrong E, that's it. The management meeting was derailed. Everything would focus on that standard. Do we have the right standards in all our pubs? And you were just drilled to this really high standard, and there was no coming away from that. If you weren't executing to that standard, you shouldn't be there. And again, it probably felt quite abusive at the time, working crazy hours, working with inspirational people, but it was unbelievable. It was that was 10 years of hospitality knowledge. It condensed into that 1 year. It was unbelievable.
Yeah. And look, I mean, the thing is as well, like when there's a lot made around like crazy hours and all of that kind of stuff. And yes, we have got way better at that for sure as an industry. But in the end, again, it's what's right for the individual, right? We talk about we should all just be doing 40 hours, but actually, if somebody is really enjoying doing 60 hours a week or even more, why should we stop them if that is what is bringing them joy to do? It's a tricky argument. I 100% understand that, but really, in the end, if you look at that, and I'm kind of also the benefactor of working long hours earlier in my career, whereby you're just absorbing so much. And you get to condense, as you say, a lot of years learning into a shorter period of time, which means that you can, in principle, advance faster because you've got a greater base knowledge than perhaps people who are not putting in those kind of hours.
Yeah, I think as long as it's an option, right, it's not the norm.
Yeah.
And I think you're right. There is a stigma attached to hours in hospitality, but I guess go right to the start of our conversation. I really enjoy hospitality. And at the level I'm at now, it's my go-to joy if I have a really tough day is to go into a restaurant and host the door and go and talk to the team, because that's my place of joy, and
Yep.
I will choose to go do that. I will choose to work that bit extra to give myself that reset. to make sure I'm on top of things and just really bring home, why am I in hospitality? Why am I doing the job I'm doing? And finding that moment, finding that like comfortable, joyous place. And if people want to do it, then sure. But also, like, don't mandate it. Make sure it's an option that they can do. So yeah, I totally agree with you.
Yeah, and also I would like to retire the phrase work-life balance. I just for one word, which is balance, because
Yeah, exactly.
everybody's balance is different on that scale. I'd think about somebody, and I'd think about a mate of mine who is in his late 60s. He's past official retirement age, but is still working. He doesn't have a partner at home. His family are nowhere near him, and for him, the enjoyment of his week is going to work and waiting tables. And so he said I would do that for 60 hours a week because I get my social fix. I get to make people feel welcome and special for a moment, and then when I go home, I'm kind of almost depressed. So I think I would prefer that we just focus on balance rather than work-life balance, because
Yeah.
that is, again, it's so different for everyone.
Yeah. Are you happy, basically? And if you're not,
Yeah.
change something.
I am happy, by the way. Thank you for asking.
Yeah, good. Good. I can tell, by the way. I can tell. But I think it's, and this has happened, I guess, a few times in my life. It's work and life when they are in like that beautiful equilibrium. Like it's totally fine. If work's going really well, then life's really good. But things change. Your life changes, goes on this path. Work changes. Whether you get taken over by a private equity firm or your boss changes and becomes someone different. Both of those things can change, and that's totally fine. Like it's I've worked in a number of businesses where people say, "Oh, this company's changed, hasn't it?" And you go, well, yeah, that's what happens.
Yeah.
The ones that don't change either cease to exist, or there are different things. So those two things are fine. I think and at the moment I can say with confidence, my work and my life align. They're in a really good place. I'm very happy with it. But if it deviates, something in my life becomes more stressful, then probably work might need to take a bit of a backseat, or I need to think about something different. Or if work becomes something I don't enjoy and it's impacting my life, then maybe something there needs to change too. So, and it happens, and it's fine.
And it's inevitable.
Yeah, exactly. And I had a really good, really positive career move coming out of Incipio Group, who are amazing to work for. It was my first ops role there, and I wanted to learn. I wanted to test whether I could do ops properly. So I went and joined State of Play Hospitality, which is a great business. They got Hijingo and Bounce in the UK, and they operate the flight clubs for Red Engine under license in the US. And a really amazing leadership team. Toby, the CEO, and Sam, the MD. So I was head of ops for Bounce. So we had the two ping pong sites found in Old Street, and we opened the new one in Battersea. But during that period of time I was at State of Play, my wife and I found out we were having a third child. So we had two quite young boys who quite hard work, and then a third one was on the way. And I very quickly realised that rolling out of Shoreditch at 1 a.m. To come home on Saturday and kind of be a bit of a write-off was not what I or my wife needed. What we needed was a job that's a bit more sensible, and restaurants were a bit more accommodating to that. And I was very, very fortunate that Rosa's came up at the right time. But it's totally fine to recognize where you don't have that balance and make a change. And it's, yeah, I agree with you. Work-life balance probably isn't a thing. Just having balance is the right way. And it goes both ways, right? Sometimes you have an easy week, and then you have a really nice life, and then the next week work can be a raging bin fire. And you
100% a raging bin fire.
That's just the way it is, right?
Yeah, totally. And look, and let's not ensure that we're only defining hospitality by these standards, right? Because that is the same of every sector under the sun. You're right. I mean, if you're lucky enough to have a moment in your life whereby you're aligned to your job and your home life is everything's just working well. Yet to have that, by the way, there's always some little thing that just needs work. Is that it's probably inevitable that you're one great day away from having a crap day, right? But that does not define a change, right? If it becomes the norm, then yes, then there's probably a change. But the reality is that whatever job you do in any sector around the world, you're gonna have crap days as well.
Yeah. Once you accept there's always work to do, you can just move on. I think acceptance is something that I really struggled with when I was a younger manager. Just accepting that things happen. That's just life as well. Like I think I really struggled to accept things, and I guess I think I was at Copper Club. So I guess just before I sort of needed to put London on my CV. So after I left Bell and Dragon, I worked with Cope for a bit, incredible business, worked again some amazing people for a reasonably short period of time. But then I ended up at Copper Club working with some amazing individuals. Tom Cousins, who's now a Boobler, Tom James, who is basically the industry voice. I was working
He's
under these
a legend.
incredible people.
Yeah.
And I had a real hard fall coming out of Copper. I made some pretty big personal mistakes, and I really had to check myself, in terms of how hard a fall it was, in terms of who I was, why was I acting the way I was, and I just wasn't again in a good place, and I don't know why. I think a lot of it was I just didn't accept where I was, or certain things that happened to me, or that I wasn't the place I wanted to be, and I had to go and find a way to figure that out. So I actually did a bit of therapy locally in Henley, a few Saturdays whilst I'd started work with Incipio, like Saturday mornings. I did about 10 sessions, I think. And I just figured it out. I figured out I just had to accept things, not just go, like, roll over and be like, oh, but just go, things have happened and it's fine. Now just move on,
Mm.
or there are things to do, go and do it, right? Rather than just saying, oh, that's happened, and dwelling on it and then not doing something about it. And I
Yeah.
think, that set me up really well for, I guess, future career, becoming a dad, doing all those things, because I have this real understanding now that just stuff happens. The only way you can take control of it is by doing something about it afterwards, really.
Mm. Yeah, totally. And I'm a fellow advocate of therapy. I'm a therapy brother as well. In a sense, I had a really, really sticky point about 10 years ago where I got two health diagnoses that happened in a very, very short space of time, and completely wobbled my core identity of who I was, etc., etc.
Mm.
And what I learned through that process was it's related to accepting things, but in my case, it was also a case of, like, let go of what you think you know, like, and almost go into every circumstance like you know nothing. And honestly, from the moment I started doing that, it's such a liberating feeling. So now, I approach most things now in a really curious mind. I might have some ideas in my head about it. In fact, I will have ideas in my head around it, but it doesn't mean that they're the right ideas. And that's it's just been such a wonderfully liberating experience to now just accept that, actually, I don't know anything about anything, in fact, and that's awesome. It's so good.
Yeah, yeah. I agree with you. Our head of L&D, Tom, who I'm sure you know, Tom Swanson, he's
Yeah,
his thing is, lower yourself on the ladder of perception. Just go into every single scenario like you have no idea what the outcome's going to be. Ask questions, be curious, keep asking questions, keep asking questions until people just are exhausted by answering questions. So then you actually understand what their perception is, what is their reality, and how can you then help them get past whatever it is, or learn whatever they need to. And you're right. I think before I had that sort of intervention, I was very directive. I was very, go and do this, implement this, go make that happen. I think I was naturally curious, but I just wasn't using that tool at all. I wasn't asking questions of my team to ensure understanding. I wasn't asking questions of my bosses to understand why things had to happen. And it did change, after that. And I really noticed that in my style. I became I probably wasn't very, what's the word? People didn't warm to me very much, I don't think, at that point in my career. And then
yeah.
afterwards, people did. I was very much more accessible. People could ask me, were more comfortable around me. Yeah.
Do you know, I find that quite remarkable as well, because as I said earlier, you and I have not known each other that long, but it strikes me, I can't imagine that Jonny at all from the Jonny that I've known. And so it just shows you, once again, kind of like doing the work on yourself, right? It's really where it's at. And it's nobody else's responsibility to do that. It might be somebody else's responsibility to highlight the fact that something's not working for you. And that might be the jolt that you need to kind of wake up to yourself. But in actual fact, I find it quite a wonderful, wonderful thing to see that you've kind of got this reflective part of yourself that looks back and goes, God, look who I was versus who I am now. So yeah, hats off.
Yeah. And I think, it's just, if people give you feedback, right, and it's entirely up to you whether you take it or not. If someone's going to give you an instruction or direction, you should go and do it. But if someone's going to give you feedback, it's entirely up to you what you do with it. And I think I went on a trip when I was at Copper, and Tom Tom Cousins, he said to me at the time, he's like, you just need to look at your self-awareness. Like, look at who you are around your peer group, around your seniors. Is that who you want to be? It's very simple bit of feedback. Again, a little 10-second intervention. But that I still think about that conversation, and I still think about, actually, was I being the best leader that I could be at that time? The answer was absolutely not. Like, I just wasn't. It's, again, that arrogance sort of crept out. That element of me that was either unfulfilled, I didn't recognize it, was there, and it was coming out in ways that just made me be an asshole. And I think, having that healthy response to feedback is really important. And at the moment, my boss Julie, my ops director, we have really healthy conflict where we feed back to each other a lot.
Yeah.
About the way she is, and she feeds back to me about the way I am, and with my team or with my peer group. And we have really healthy sort of course correcting guardrails and feedback with each other. And that's so important to have at like our level, a leadership team level, because you need that. You need to have that so that you can then have the conversation with your team, or you can correct yourself, because you don't know how you appear or how you look like. Someone does need to tell you, and again, you can choose to ignore it, but generally, I tend to find it's I take it on the chin now and go, yeah, you're right.
Yeah, and it could be
right.
it could be tough to hear initially, right? But as soon as it's habit forming as well, as soon as you get into the psyche of why, and it's said with the right intention and with love, and it's actually to make you better, us better. That's a very, very different framing. And in fact, I would advocate for anybody out there who utilizes any of the AI tools that are available to riff with, the likes of Chat and Claude and all of that kind of stuff, is go into your back settings and teach it to, or not teach it, you actually just need to put in, be the hardest mentor that I've ever had in my life, pick holes in everything that I do, call me out, blah, blah, blah. You'll get way more interesting stuff from your AI partner than you would if it's just going, do you know what, that idea is maybe the best idea that I've ever heard in my whole entire life.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Driving at 200 mile per hour is a dangerous thing to do, but hey, no, I think, teaching it to giving you counterintuitive arguments, which you wouldn't normally have that angle of attack on. That is what it's there for. Any form of critical thinking, AI can firmly keep itself firmly away from it.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm conscious of your time. I am conscious of the fact that at one, have we concluded your journey? We've touched it kind of. We've not done it linearly, I would say. We've done it a bit here and a bit there.
Christopher Nolan movie.
Yeah, that's cool. I'm on board with that. I'll put a Hans Zimmer soundtrack over it. When
oh my god, that'd be amazing. That's my life goal. I'd love to have a Zimmer soundtrack. Yeah, amazing.
Yeah. Have you driven one of the BMW? I think it's the BMW i series, the electric cars. They've got Hans Zimmer designed sounds around the way you drive, so you can you engage the Hans Zimmer mode, and you accelerate, and this searing strings section just plays in the car, and all that.
So if you spun the BMW at 60 revolutions per minute, it would start doing the docking scene from Interstellar, like that sort of thing.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, that talk about sending your guest on an experience, right? That was that almost made me want to buy a BMW, but I'm not going to be that guy. But anyway, I digress. But yeah, are we leaving anything out there on your career? Have we missed any places?
I don't think so. I mean, yeah, I think we got the jumping around bit. I think we got the good, the bad, and the very, very ugly in there. So, yeah, no, I think we're pretty well covered. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, I mean, I obviously I cannot let you depart without talking about some funny stories. Although I think you're just a naturally funny storyteller anyway. But the one that I wanted to really kind of hone in on, well, there was two actually. It was one involving a roof leak, and one involving Halloween.
Oh my goodness! Yeah, I mean, that goes down in legend now in Coat, and I think probably if I tell the story out, and if anyone who's involved in that is watching this, they'll shudder. Yeah, I mean, so where do I start? Coat. So Coat, again, a heavily branded operation, and I guess my first exposure to a heavily branded operation in terms of what Coat was, and it was the core team that was there was absolutely unbelievable. So Becky Tooth, who then moved on to sort of be COO at Bills and was at Everyman, she was my area manager. And she was an absolutely ruthlessly hard taskmaster, but an absolutely awesome leader, like really, really good at just holding to account. If you didn't get something done, you were 1 minute late on the deadline, you were, hauled over the coals, quite openly and publicly. That wasn't, it was a very good way for me to be managed, particularly in Coat. So I was running the Windsor restaurant, which had quite a large amount of sort of leadership issues before I took over. So we had to build a team pretty much from scratch and basically a turnaround project. And we turned it around pretty quickly. A lot of hard work went into it. I had a really solid team with me, some great support from other restaurants, and some really good support from Becky. But I think it was, I was taking photos last night. It was October 2015. And I just very innocently said to the team, "Yeah, let's dress up for Halloween." Not fully aware that was an absolute no. But the team did an incredible job. Like they all had like terrifying makeup on, wigs, cloaks, costumes. It looked awesome, and we probably would have got away with it if we didn't get a review from someone on TripAdvisor saying it's the worst coat experience they ever had. Everyone's dressed up. It felt like it was run by children. It was an absolute.
wow.
It must still be on there actually. I will have a look actually back into
Yeah, I'm going to hunt that out.
October 2015. But I just got slammed and I got pulled apart. And then, I mean, I got seriously pulled apart. But in, I don't know, I guess I was a bit cheeky in my response. So I think I got away with it. But every single year in Coat after that, and I'd left after that to go to Copper, there was the sort of newsletter which very strictly said, "Do not dress up at Halloween, do not decorate." I changed the company strategy, to be like, as soon as Halloween comes, everyone gets this fear. So,
oh man,
yeah,
I love that. I had when I was reading your notes on the story, I had a vision in my head around of all of these crew members like going to town with their outfits. And somebody walking into the restaurant for the first time and almost going, "What the hell is going on?" Just crying children everywhere, because they're being served by Dracula or a zombie or something like that.
I think the majority of the feedback from that night was actually quite positive.
I'm sure it would have been. It's an experience, right?
Just whoever Grumpy Man 3000 was, whatever their name is, dropped that review and ruined it for everyone. Yeah,
that's more on him than on you. That's all I'm going to say.
And I really hope Becky watches this and goes, oh, just feels
yeah, she's like, do you know what? I had actually eradicated that from my head. So thanks very much, Jonny. You just brought that back.
But anyways, I learned more intricately the art of branded operations and how operators must be drilled to execute the brand. So I guess I had my personal learnings from it.
For sure.
Yeah.
And then the roof leak.
Yeah, I mean, anyone who knows the Prince in West Brompton, and I've got quite a close friend of mine there who's now the GM. It was, I think the founder, Charlie, got really offended once when one of his mates described it as a glorified garden centre. But I mean, that's effectively what it was. It was an old pub called the Prince, Prince of Wales. And then behind it, and I don't know if you've ever been to it, but was Earl's Court Exhibition Centre. So basically central London's biggest wasteland. It's just this big space that nothing was happening with. Local councils had changed. Nothing was being done with the space. So tacked to the back of the Prince of Wales was just this massive wooden and polycarb roof structure. And I was very fortunate to take the Prince on at a time pretty much sort of near the start of it becoming a big thing, where it was just enormously popular. It was right at the start of influencer movements. It was right at the start of, Instagram and becoming such a massive tool. 2019, pre-COVID, everyone wanted to be there, celebrities all the time. And it suddenly just got very, very, very busy and very popular. Stunning business. It would take some serious money. And I think what happened was we had to kind of build things as we got more busy. So we put a retractable roof in, but the rest of the roof was polycarb, and then we had to put some guttering in, and then we had to put some projector screens in, and then we had to put, we put all these things and we just tack them on. And then COVID happened. So we kind of just left it to do its own thing for a while, checked on it every now and then, to make sure it was still there. So I'd go up there sort of once every 2 weeks, check in on it, come back home, sit and play PlayStation in the dark for 15 hours a day,
Yeah.
and then
What a time.
as
What a time.
COVID was, and then we reopened. But we reopened as one of the venues that had outdoor space. The retractable roof kind of gave us that license to as long as we had it open, we could get a certain amount of people in. So one night, when all the restrictions had dropped, we filled the place up, as you do, and super busy. And then the heavens opened, and basically the problem with that roof was it was just this massive flat space. So if you got enough of a deluge of water, all the water from the pub and all the water on the flat roof and all the water from the gutters on the side and everything that had fit on the side, particularly if you hadn't cleaned the leaves out the gutter, it would just overload it. It would just be a complete overwhelming of water. So it must have been a Friday night. It was DJ Lola was playing, this lovely woman. She was absolutely hilarious. And it just poured through in the middle of about 500 people in the garden area. And it was, it's a sort of business. It was taking like 10 grand an hour. It was just proper. It's the time where you make the money, and everyone was partying, having fun. This water's deluged down. There's nothing. I didn't want to exit the venue. It was perfectly safe. There's just water coming down into the center of the garden, and then just kind of just shuffling off to the side. So I just shouted at Lola. I was like, "Lola, play Umbrella." So she put on Umbrella by Rihanna, and it just goes like festival mode. As this water was coming down for about 10 minutes, she did Umbrella, then she did It's Raining Men, and then all the water clear, but everyone was just like running through this water coming off the roof. It was just like some of the team members were doing like the splits in it, and like it was just a bizarre moment, like this real comedy moment where you stood looking at the whole venue like, is this safe? Is this happening? Are we allowed to do this? Are we the real moments where you're like, everyone seems to be having fun. And yeah, that was anyone who's associated with the Prince or has been to the Prince will know, will have been dripped on or knows about the sort of the issues of the roof. But it's also, I don't think I've ever worked in a hospitality venue where there isn't some form of leak coming through a ceiling or roof. I just don't know what it is. We seem to build roofs out of colanders. I don't know. But,
yeah. What I love about that though, like, is you turned a precarious moment into an experience for people, I guess, in the end. And in my head, I was trying to think, what other songs could you play? You need to have something by Wet, 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 obviously. But
Love Is All Around You doesn't go down well 8:00 on a Friday night.
No, when you're getting rained on. Yeah. But no, brilliant. Look, thank you so much. It's been an absolute joy to spend some time with you, learning about your journey. What a journey it is as well. I massively appreciate you being so open and candid about your own foibles through that as well. That is where it's at. None of us are perfect. We all have our things to get better at, and that definitely came across in our chat, amongst other things, by the way. Not just about that. Just get better, Jonny.
Fine. Yeah. I will. Thank you.
But and wish you guys, Rosa, massive fan of what you guys are doing as well. Wish you all the very best with the next phase of whatever is coming for the group.
Thank you. Thanks, Phil.
Good man. Cheers. And there we have it. Jonny showing us that hospitality careers are rarely straight lines. They're usually built through mistakes, mad mentors, long shifts, resilience, and occasionally getting fired before finding where you truly belong. We will, of course, be back next week with another awesome journey from hospitality, so have yourselves a cracking week, and I'll see you then.